Ottawa imposed an export ban on potatoes from the island to the U.S. That was back in November due to the unsightly but harmless wart.
Very significant market, long-term relationships there. Anything that would impact that is obviously of huge concern.
And just like the seafood industry, PEI potato growers want an end to this too. And they hope that pressure from American farmers will turn the tide on tariffs. In the meantime, they're looking at other global markets and trying to plan around all the uncertainty.
Most people never think twice about the fries sitting next to their burger. They are treated as a simple, forgettable side dish. Yet behind those fries is a vast cross-border system worth billions of dollars, one that quietly links Canadian farms to American drive-through windows every single day. In recent years, Canada exported roughly $2.7 billion worth of frozen French fries annually, and an extraordinary 91% of that supply went directly to the United States. Walk into McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, or nearly any major fast food chain, and the chances are overwhelming that the fries on the tray began as Canadian potatoes, processed and frozen in Canadian plants. For years, this relationship powered the American fast food industry with little public attention. It worked smoothly, efficiently, and predictably. That sense of stability is now under threat. Political decisions, particularly tariff moves under President Donald Trump, have injected uncertainty into a supply chain that was long considered rock solid. Canadian processors are increasingly questioning whether the U.S. market remains worth the risk, and contingency planning is no longer theoretical. As contracts come under review and alternative markets are explored, a staple of everyday American meals suddenly looks far less secure. The scale of Canada's potato exports helps explain why this issue matters so much. According to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's official potato market review, Canada is a net exporter of potato products, with the United States firmly at the center of that trade. During the 2023 to 2024 period, Canada exported about $3.7 billion worth of potato products in total. Frozen French fries dominated that figure, accounting for approximately $2.7 billion on their own. Of that amount, roughly $2.4 billion crossed the border into the U.S. This single flow represents one of the largest bilateral food trade links in North America, even though most consumers never realize it exists. Digging deeper into the numbers reveals just how dependent the system has become. Canada shipped around $50 million worth of seed potatoes, with 96% going to American buyers. Fresh potato exports totaled about $493 million, and 93% of that volume also headed south. Across every major category, the pattern remained consistent. Canada produces, and the United States buys. Fast food menus, restaurant pricing, and supply contracts have all been built on the assumption that this flow will continue uninterrupted. The relationship, however, is not one-sided. The United States imports roughly $456 million in potato products from Canada each year, accounting for about 85% of all American potato imports. Within that total, processed potatoes make up approximately $440 million, including $126 million specifically tied to frozen French fries. These figures illustrate a system that functions less like two competing national industries and more like a shared production network. In practical terms, the Canadian and American potato sectors operate as two halves of the same industrial ecosystem. Each side has specialized over time. Canada focuses on large-scale production and processing efficiency, while U.S. growers and processors handle other segments of the market. Different growing regions, potato varieties, and processing strengths complement each other rather than overlap. The result has been a tightly integrated North American supply chain capable of delivering consistent volume and quality to restaurants, retailers, and food distributors year-round. That balance is now under strain as tariff threats hang over the entire structure, though Canada's own potato production reflects how thoroughly this system has been optimized for processing. In 2024, Canadian farms produced approximately 5.8 million metric tons of potatoes. About 34% came from Atlantic Canada, 19% from central regions, and 48% from prairie provinces, particularly Alberta and Manitoba. Those prairie provinces play an outsized role in frozen potato products. Alberta alone accounts for roughly 24% of total national production, while Manitoba contributes about 21%. The most revealing detail lies in how those potatoes are used. Nearly 69% of Canada's total potato output in 2024 went directly into processing, including frozen fries, chips, and other value-added products. Only about 20% was destined for the fresh table market, with the remaining 11% reserved for seed. Provinces such as Alberta, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island anchor the frozen fry sector, hosting massive processing facilities operated by companies like McCain Foods, Simplot, and Cavendish Farms over the past 7 years. These firms invested hundreds of millions of dollars into expanding existing plants and building new ones, especially in Alberta and Manitoba. Those investments were made with a clear expectation: rising demand from American quick-service restaurants. Additional capacity was built to meet that demand, locking both sides even more tightly together. Today, that same expanded capacity sits at the center of the current dilemma. While it allows Canadian processors to feed U.S. fast food chains at enormous scale, it also gives them the leverage and flexibility to reconsider where their fries ultimately end up if the trade relationship continues to fracture, or if the United States market begins to look unstable. Canadian processing facilities have options. They can redirect output to other buyers with relative ease. American fast food chains, by contrast, cannot quickly replace millions of metric tons of frozen potato supply without disruption. That imbalance is what made President Donald Trump's threat of a 25% tariff on frozen, fresh, and seed potatoes from Canada so alarming to the industry. The potato sector already operates on thin margins, where transportation, energy, and labor costs absorb most of the value. A tariff of that size would not simply raise prices. It would force contract to be rewritten almost overnight. The deeper problem goes beyond the tariff rate itself. Uncertainty has become the real threat. When processors cannot predict whether tariffs will land at 10%, 25%, or escalate further within weeks, long-term planning breaks down. When negotiations can be derailed by political messaging or sudden policy shifts, confidence erodes. In that environment, companies respond rationally. They reduce exposure, adjust volumes, and rethink commitments to markets that no longer feel dependable. Evidence of that shift is already visible. Reporting by the Western Producer in April 2025 revealed that potato processors had informed farmers they would require fewer potatoes for the 2025 growing season. Contract discussions reflected reduced volumes, driven largely by trade instability rather than a collapse in demand. While other pressures exist, including slightly softer fry demand in recent quarters and surplus inventories from the 2024 harvest, those factors alone do not explain the timing or scale of the pullback. Short-term demand for French fries fluctuates, but long-term projections tell a very different story. Frozen potato consumption across North America is expected to grow at an annual rate of about 1.5% through 2035, reaching an estimated 3.8 million tons. In 2024, the United States consumed roughly 2.8 million tons of frozen potatoes, accounting for 88% of all North American consumption. That appetite is not disappearing. What is changing is how Canadian processors choose to serve it. Canadian firms reduce their reliance on American contracts. Attention naturally shifts toward markets that offer greater stability. Asia stands out immediately. In 2024, Canada exported approximately 1.4 million tons of frozen potato products worldwide, with the United States remaining the largest destination. Japan ranked second, while South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, and other Asian economies continued to show rising demand. Growing middle-class populations and the spread of Western-style fast food are driving steady consumption across the region. Canadian processors are well-positioned to meet that demand. They understand regional quality standards, maintain long-standing trade relationships, and already ship significant volumes to Asia. What has changed is not capacity or capability, but motivation. Each new tariff threat reinforces the idea that the U.S. market carries political risk. Each episode of trade uncertainty encourages processors to deepen ties with buyers in Tokyo, Seoul, and Manila instead of expanding exposure south of the border. The shift does not need to be dramatic to matter. Even a reallocation of 5 to 10% of Canadian frozen potato exports away from the United States would significantly tighten supply for American fast food chains. Domestic production cannot ramp up quickly enough to close that gap. In 2024, the United States produced about 2.2 million tons of frozen potatoes, while Canada produced roughly 1.8 million tons and exported about 1.4 million tons of that output. American exports totaled only 935,000 tons, marking the 5th consecutive year in which the United States functioned as a net importer of frozen potato products. That import dependence rests heavily on Canada. About 86% of American frozen French fry imports come from Canadian suppliers, with the European Union accounting for another 13%. Beyond those sources, alternatives are limited. There is no reserve capacity waiting to step in if Canadian shipments decline. European processors are already committed elsewhere, and building new North American processing capacity would take years, not months. A Canadian supply to the United States would fall by just 10% as processors redirect volume toward Asia. The missing fries would have to come from somewhere. Yet U.S. processing plants are already operating close to capacity, focused on meeting existing restaurant and retail demand. Expanding acreage, building new plants, and securing labor and energy inputs are long-term projects. Not emergency fixes. Potatoes matter because they touch something deeply familiar. When fries become more expensive or harder to source, consumers notice immediately. Canada continues to harvest around 5.8 million metric tons of potatoes annually, much of it concentrated in Alberta and Manitoba. Companies like McCain Foods, Simplot, and Cavendish Farms continue to produce frozen fries on an industrial scale. The supply has not disappeared. What is changing is where that supply goes. Shipments that once flowed predictably into Ohio, Texas, and California are increasingly steered toward ports bound for Asia. For Canadian processors, those markets offer demand growth without the constant risk of political disruption. For American fast food chains, the loss of even a small share of Canadian supply introduces cost pressures and logistical challenges that are difficult to absorb. At its core, this shift reflects a fundamental redefinition of the relationship. What was long treated as a stable North American trade partnership is now viewed, under the shadow of Donald Trump's policies, as a risk to manage rather than an alliance to rely on. The fries may look the same on the tray, but the system behind them is quietly being reshaped.